How's everybody doing today? Did you have a good week? That's awful. Did you have a good week? Okay. Yeah, just wondering. I mean, gosh, got to have a little more excitement than that to the week. Kick off the week right. I know last week I wasn't here. I missed you. I did. I missed you. And, I'm so glad to be back today. I had a nice trip to Texas. Somebody's already asked me about grandchildren. I said, yes, they are plump and just want to squeeze them, but you can't. Like the Charmin, Anyway, can't squeeze them, but there's, little chunky 4-month-olds. Anyway, it's good to see you. Anybody going to watch football this afternoon? Some don't care. I got you. Or you're just too cool to raise your hand. That really is the part of it, too cool to raise it. People love an underdog story. So I guess the next question is, who is pulling for San Francisco this afternoon? See? Oh, I got some traders in the back. People in the back. No, I'm kidding. It's good. You pull for your team. I'm pulling for Detroit. Do you know why? They stink. Over the last 40, no, more than that. It's funny, I still think of 1980 as 20 years ago. The last 1950-something was the last time they won a championship. Detroit has been so bad for so long, and at some point I finally go, they might win. We love underdog stories, right? We love them. I got 1983, I was a junior in high school. Some of you weren't born yet, I understand that. A couple of you were around back then? Okay. And this team that played basketball, NC State, was not even going to qualify for the tournament unless they won the ACC championship tournament, and they did. And then you'd expect them to lose, and they kept winning. And finally they beat University of Houston, and there was no way they could beat Houston, but guess what? They did. Everybody loves an underdog story. Did lots of people pull for that team? Absolutely. Because they were fans of them? No. Just because they were the underdogs. It gave hope to some people in a lot of ways. And today we're going to read a story about an underdog. You've heard this story at least 100 times. But today maybe you'll hear it a little slightly different. So if you will, turn with me to 1 Samuel chapter 17. And we're going to talk about the great story of David versus Goliath. See, you know you know it all. You know the story. It's a wonderful whole chapter story. So listen to it. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Socoh in Judah, and they pitched camp at Ephes-dammim between Socoh and Azekah. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah. There we go. And drew up their battle lines to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill, and the Israelites occupied another, with the valley down between them. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span. Anybody read the little note down there? How tall was he? 9 foot 9 inches. Now, I've been around a lot of big people in my life because my best buddy worked for a TV station when we covered sports. So I've seen Shaquille O'Neal in person, and I've seen some of the offensive linemen, defensive linemen of the Panthers, and even the Cowboys and all these different teams. And I've never seen anybody 9 foot tall. And so what it made me think about was there's a story back in the Old Testament in the book of Genesis chapter 6 about the ark, about before Noah built the ark. It said that Nephilim were in the world at that time, and they had married human women. The Nephilim were considered giants. So I have to wonder if this is somehow this guy Goliath is part of that group or that race. Anyway, interesting thought. There's no proof of it, but it's interesting. And it just goes to show you how we sometimes put scripture together there. It said he had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear staff was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went ahead of him. In other words, he was just not only imposing physically, he was imposing with all his armor on. And his armor weighed 150 pounds, as much as many human beings weighed. And so he's so big and he's so scary looking. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us. Now think about this. Now, when I say Philistine, if you think modern day, who am I talking about? Palestine, the Palestinians. So they have now here's the funny thing. You got to get a visual picture here. One's on one side on a hill, and there's a valley, too far to throw spears or anything. And there's another hill. And every day, day after day, they just line up. Nobody's fighting. They're at war, but nobody's fighting. Right? So that's the story. So Goliath steps, and if you're the Philistines, this is a great deal. If we can send one giant Goliath who's probably going to beat anybody they have, if we can send him out and we can win a war and not lose an eye or even a drop of blood, what a great deal, right? If you're an Israelite, you're going, I don't think I like that deal. We're not sending anybody out to fight Goliath. So that's where they stood. He says, that's just not going to happen. So then, verse 10, then the Philistines said, this day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other. On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Now David was the son of an Ephrathite named Jesse, who was from Bethlehem in Judah. Jesse had 8 sons, and in Saul's time, he was very old. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to the war. The firstborn was Eliab, the second Abinadab, and the third Shammah. Now those are wonderful biblical names. I don't think I've ever met a boy named Abinadab. I don't know. David was the youngest. The 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's sheep in Bethlehem. For 40 days, the Philistine came forward every morning and evening and stood and took his stand. In other words, he's calling them out every morning, every afternoon. Nothing's happening. Now Jesse said to his son David, take this ephah of roasted grain and 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry to their camp. Now, see, he doesn't know. We don't have, any kind of news agency covering this. Jesse's at home, and Jesse says, my 2 oldest are out in the middle of the war. He says, go check on them. Take these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are and bring back some assurance from them. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah fighting against the Philistines. Early in the morning, David left the flock in the care of a shepherd, loaded up, and set out as Jesse had directed. Now, you got to remember, a couple of weeks ago, but in one chapter ago, David has been anointed by Samuel to be the next king as a boy. And David's still a boy. Saul doesn't have a clue that Samuel and God have changed, that God's changed God's mind about him being the king. So he has no, but David is now the future king in waiting. And so it says, he reached the camp, and as the army was going out to its battle position, shouting the war cry, Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other. And like I said, they're basically dancing. One crowd on one side, one crowd on the other side, and this is really a 7th grade dance going on. You know how the girls line up on one side and the boys line up on, nobody goes, and anyway, that's what's going on. So David left his things with the keeper of supplies, ran to the battle lines, and asked his brothers how they were. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out of his lines and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. Whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him in great fear. Now the Israelites had been saying, do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage and will exempt his family from taxes in Israel. David asked the men standing near him, "What will be done for the man who kills the Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" They repeated to him what they had been saying and told him, "This is what will be done for the man who kills him." When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at David and at him and asked, "Why have you come down here?" Anybody got a little brother or sister when you're growing up? See, I was the little brother. I was the pestilence. The one that was, "Will you go away? What do you do? Go back and do it." That's what was happening. The older brother goes, "You're being a pest. You going back to see Dad. You can't fight. You're too young. Get out of here. And you're bothering these men. You're making us," because at some point you got to realize that David sees what the Philistine giant says and hears him and says, "Well, why are we not fighting him?" Because you know this truth. Youth can be quite ignorant. What you don't know can hurt you in some ways. And here's this young guy, David, going, "Hey, man, let's go fight. Let's go fight." And all the other people are going, "Have you seen this guy?" No, we're not fighting. No, we're dancing. Remember, we're dancing. And to some degree, David's embarrassing his brothers because they're supposed to be fighting, but they're not fighting at all. They've done nothing. And he basically says, "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness?" He's putting him down, of course. "I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle, which is not taking place." Now, I think about this. Two brothers and an older brother putting down the younger brother. And I think to myself this, honestly. There is no greater testimony in my mind in the New Testament. Of course, we hear about the resurrection of Jesus. But to say who Jesus was, when your brother who lived with you and knows you, writes about you, in this case, Jesus and James, the book of James, he knew, and he said Jesus was exactly who we believe he is. James does not say something opposite or different or a negative about Jesus. And I find that fascinating because, brother, you have a sister or brother or some family member. You know each other. You would never claim your brother or sister as Jesus, as God. No. No matter how wonderful they are. But that's what James does with Jesus. And here these brothers are arguing. And he says, "Now, what have I done?" said David. "Can I even speak?" Then he turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter. And the men answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. In other words, "You say you want to fight him?" David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go out and fight him." Saul replied, "You're not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by the hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Now, does that sound conceited? I think it sounds pretty confident. Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." And then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over his tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. "I can't go in these," he said to Saul, "because I am not used to them." So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in a pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand approached the Philistine. Now, this kid, because first of all, it's a young man. Maybe he's tall and maybe he looks like a normal guy. He's old enough. He's fought a bear, so he can't be too little. But he is a young man, and he comes out towards the giant, and he doesn't have armor on. He doesn't look, he's not scary. Nothing to be afraid of here. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome. And he despised him. I love it. He despised him. It reminded me, we love underdogs, like I said. Anybody watch Rocky? Remember Rocky? How many of you cheered for Apollo Creed? Nobody. But he was handsome, and he was, the champ and all. You didn't cheer for Apollo until he fought a Russian, right? Yeah, I know you. But anyway, long story short, nobody cheers for the champ. And Goliath is clearly the champ. And so here comes David out looking all, non-threatening. Nobody's worried. And we hate Goliath even more as he despised David. He said to David, "Am I a dog, that you come out to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. Come here and let me kill you." David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with a sword and a spear and javelin. But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him, reaching into his bag and taking out a stone. Excuse me, not 5. 1. Not the second shot, not the third shot, not a fourth shot, but 1 stone. He slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, deeply into his forehead, evidently, and he fell face down on the ground. The one spot that was not covered by his amazing armor. 1 shot, 1 stone, 1 giant dead. So David triumphed over the Philistine, and with a sling and a stone, without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from the sheath. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the giant's own sword. That's pretty awesome. I'm sorry, I find that pretty awesome. If you got a view of Jesus, his tie-dye T-shirt, loving, peace, everything. Yeah, imagine David walking around with a head in his hand. How's that? And God was with him in the midst of this. I find that wonderful. Then the Philistines saw that their hero was dead. They turned and ran. And of course, a fleeing army is a dying army. When the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout and pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath and to the gates of Ekron. Yeah, now they moved. They waited they were like 7th grade boys waiting for that last dance to finally go ask a girl to do something, right? Come dance with me, finally. So their dead was strewn along the Shirim road to Gath and Ekron, and when the Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines, they plundered their camp. David took the Philistine's head and brought it to Jerusalem. He put the Philistines' weapons in his own tent. As Saul watched David going out of the meeting, out to meet the Philistine, he said to Abner, commander of the army, "Abner, whose son is this young man?" Abner replied, "As surely as you live, your majesty, I don't know." The king said, "Find out whose son this young man is." As soon as David returned from killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul, with David still holding the Philistine's head.
Head, that's a big head. Dude's 9'9". He got a big old head. Fred Flintstone head, you know what I mean? Whose son are you, young man? Saul asked him. David said, I am the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem. Isn't that a great story? So did David kill Goliath? One question, did David kill Goliath? No, that is correct. David was merely the tool, the instrument of God's destruction of Goliath. See, here's the thing. A few years ago, there was a movie called Facing the Giants. Remember that? Anybody see that? Yeah, Facing the Giants. And it was about a football team that was the loser, and they, they were gonna be champions. And if you just believed in yourself and you worked hard and you were a good teammate and you could get down and bear crawl and put somebody, remember he put somebody on his back and he crawled across. You can do it, he said. And he crawls 100 yards with somebody on his back. Amazing to see human beings do such amazing things, isn't it? Was that the point of the story? It was in the movie, but I have to tell you, I disagree. I did not think that was the reason that team won. I believed it was because they prayed and they were faithful. See, that's what, when you put your faith in God, you don't put your faith in the sword or the stones or the this or the that or the money or the finance or the physical, because we all face giants. And the giants you face may be financial, may be physical, a deteriorating body. What you face, family problems, work problems, all kind of things happen. And when you face those things, let me just be very clear. It's not called, you're not going to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and suck it up and I'm going to overcome. God's going to overcome for you. And sometimes that overcoming doesn't always mean the success that it looks like. Did the Facing the Giants team win the championship? And the answer is no, they lost. Did Rocky win the first fight? No, he lost. Sometimes you lose. I'm going to tell you the answer to this is, why do some people have something happen and it works out great and sometimes it doesn't? And the answer is, I don't know. But miracles do occur regularly. I'm going to tell you of two. Margaret, do you still have cancer? Do you still have cancer? That's a miracle. You can say, well, it was technology. It was no, that's a miracle. Because I know people that have had technology and medicine and all, and it didn't work, and they died. That's a miracle. That's a miracle. Why you and somebody else? I do not know. I don't know. But I will give God total credit. That's one. Sorry. Who can guess the second? Baby Reagan. Chelsea and Weston tried for years. Lost child after child. Finally. Did they get mad and leave the church or get mad at God? Did they throw their hands up and say, I don't believe in God anymore because I didn't get what I want? How many people do that? I'm going to tell you more than I would like to think. In my life, I've 30 years of ministry, I've met lots of folks that get mad because something didn't go their way at church or in their personal life. And so they say, God must have hurt me. And God doesn't hurt you. We live in a broken world where 5 babies come along and that you'll meet them one day in heaven. You'll meet them in heaven. One baby. That's all it took, one, to show you the miracle of grace and love. And I told him, I said, I don't know why y'all got pregnant and were able to have this child. I don't know why, but I'm so glad for you. But mainly I'm so proud that you didn't quit God. Your faith, without seeing, because we sometimes walk by sight, not by faith. But the Bible tells us to walk by faith, not by sight. They walked by faith. Margaret walked by faith. Because here's the answer to all this, and here's the answer to all your giants. There's another part of the story, the last section. God says to you, this brokenness is temporary. Whatever you face here may seem gigantic, but the bottom line is it's small. And here's the truth. Jesus says he is with you. He has died and been resurrected for you. He has changed you into a future of resurrected body in eternity. The good news is we don't deserve it, but we're going to get, if you put your faith and trust in Jesus, you're going to live eternally with the Lord and going to overcome all these earthly giants, this crap. In fact, they're going to look like midgets. They're going to look like ants. You're going to laugh about, was I really worried about that? Was I really upset? I think we're going to laugh later in heaven and go, gosh, we were so silly. We were like children. We had no idea. Because, youth is ignorance, and sometimes even as old as we are, we can be quite ignorant. The truth of this matter is David didn't kill Goliath. He was the instrument God used. You be the instrument that God uses in your life to do good and to love people and to care for each other and to protect each other. What a blessing God has given us. God is a living God, and he is for you. Amen.
Our hymn of meditation